Welcome. I want to say this program supports our mission to educate voters so that they are prepared to participate in elections. Please join me in welcoming Westlake Council President Dave Greenspan as our speaker. We appreciate his time and participation in this program to educate ourselves and members of the community on the functions of government that influence our daily lives. Tonight, we hope to shed some light on processes that may not be obvious to residents, specifically how counties and cities work together. Dave Greenspan is a resident of Westlake, Ohio. He currently serves as the Westlake City Council President. His accomplished career includes experiences in corporate America and C-suite positions, including strategic planning, business development, and financial management, roles that included Chief Financial Officer, Chief Operating Officer, and Chief Executive Officer. In government, he was elected and served 6 years as a Cuyahoga County Council member, 4 years as state representative for the 16th district at the Ohio House of Representatives, and in January of 22 began his term as Westlake City Council President. He's also currently working at Metro Health System in their local and state government relations. With this background, we look forward to tonight's conversation with him and hearing his insights on how levels of government work together, hopefully in theory and in practice. Again, if you'd like to write a question or ask a question, it is an interactive presentation, so we hope you will participate. We have promised him that we would hold it to 1 hour, so we will let you go at that time. And the lead chapter will continue to hold the meeting. Anyone that's welcome to stay and observe or participate is invited to do so. Okay, Dave, thank you for being here. I'll hand it over to you and ask for your opening comments.
Sure. If I don't have anything really prepared, just, first of all, thank you for hosting this. And I've tried to engage as much as possible, Janice knows, with the legal and voters. I think what you do is very important as far as educating and educating the constituency and folks about what government, in this case, government's all about, what issues are important to you, and making myself available, I think, is really important. And Nick Denari, by the way, is here. He's a council member here in Westlake in Ward 2. So I want to recognize him for the job he does. He's here to learn. He's here actually. He's going to be my phone friend right here. So if I need assistance on Nick, Nick's been on council for a long time. So he'll be a good resource as well. So interestingly, and it was in my bio, and I appreciate that, there was one other time that I did serve in an elected capacity. Back in 2005, I served in Georgia on a city called Sandy Springs. Now, the interesting thing about Sandy Springs is that it's a city of nearly 100,000 people, but it was the first new city in Georgia to be formed in nearly 50 years. In Georgia, the way you become a city is a little different than here in Ohio. Ohio, it's based on population, gradually up based on size of your city. In Georgia, it's an act of the legislature. And so the legislature, for whatever reason, for a long time, did not allow another city to incorporate. So you were either a city or you were an unincorporated portion of the county run by the county. So that was it. We didn't have villages or townships. And when we kind of broke that dam and became the first city in the state, I can't tell you now how many additional cities have joined. I mean, I've gone down that path. I know 12 months after we did, 2 more came on board. And so we kind of set a trend. If you can imagine an area of 100,000 people, the size of Westlake Bay here, off the Rock River in Westlake. That's how big we were, managed by the county. And to put it in perspective, and I want to talk about that a lot, but actually talks about the relationship now. It didn't work between city and county government. For that large of an area that county managed all of our services, we had 5 sheriff's deputies that patrolled that entire area. So if you can imagine from Bay Village to southern North Olmsted to eastern Fairview Park, there being 5 policemen on the street, assuming they were all there. Now, if somebody called 104, if they would take somebody to the jail, it was basically the equivalent of downtown Cleveland. If they had a medical issue, they were the equivalent of Metro Health. They were Brady. So there were times where we literally had no patrolmen on our streets for 100,000 people. Fire service was the same way. When we decided, when we incorporated, we contracted with our county fire service. We had 4 stations, 8 apparatus, which was fine. That's about what they have now. But if they needed a fire truck, fireman in another part of the county, they would take it out of our community. And we had two major interstates running through our city. So that was one of the main reasons we decided to become a city, was because we weren't getting the county provided services that we thought we needed. And there was a complete bias in Fulton County between North Fulton and South Fulton. The libraries, to give you an example, there were 4 libraries, I believe, north of the city of Atlanta and 20 south. And we had the same amount of population. There was some weird things going on there. And that's why most of northern Fulton County now, I believe all of it is incorporated. But we were the first ones that got involved in that. So, and from 05 to 07, I was involved in that. I moved up here in 07 and was asked to run for county government. And it was interesting when I got the call to consider running, I actually said I have zero interest in running for county government, zero. Yeah. And so the individual said to me, well, which was Mayor Clough, and he said, well, consider it. You're the only one that's been involved in starting a government before. You're new to the area, so you're not tied to any of the corruption. You can bring a fresh perspective. So it was a Friday night at 6 o'clock. I remember when he called it and said to my wife, you know, I got this call and maybe consider this. And she said, why did they tell me to do that for 6 months? Why have you not listened to me, but you listened to him? And I said, well, let me call him back. She said, no, let him sweat it out. Call him Monday. So I called her back Monday and I said, hey, I'm in. So I was fortunate within a 5-year period in 2 different states to be elected to 2 different forms of government, both being inaugural bodies. And I really think that experience of forming the city in Georgia helped me reach out to, and I think it struck a chord with constituents, understanding that I had some experience that was unique, and I happened to be here, and I gave a fresh perspective. And at that point, if you remember, that's when the county was going through its big corruption scandal, and I ran on a platform of ethics and integrity. And as a candidate, I think 10 days after I filed my petitions, I actually authored a draft ethics ordinance, and I had people criticize me. They said, we need jobs, we don't need to focus on them. I said, look, it's all related. You know, people invest, if you invest in the stock market or mutual funds, you invest for 2 reasons into that organization: quality of product and quality of management. Well, you do the same thing in government. The reason people invest in good cities is quality of government, quality of management. That's why when we look here in Westlake, you know, some of the things we talk about on council are issues other communities would love to have as the only issues they're worried about. We don't have to where we're financially very sound. Our roads are in great shape. You know, we just appropriated more money because we have a sidewalk, you know, maintenance program, and we offer the city will help offset some of the costs. And this year we had twice as many people that we budgeted participate in the program. So we offer that other communities don't. So we've got some issues here. I say issues really kind of tongue in cheek. We provide opportunities, and we have great things to offer our citizens, and we see what's happening. We had some realtors come in and present to us back in May or June to tell us what they're seeing here in the west side of Cuyahoga County in eastern Moraine as far as growth and development. And one of the things they talk about on the residential side is usually they have about 300 homes for sale at any one time in that summer period. We only had 50 because they were selling like that and people wanted to move here. On the commercial and industrial side, we're 95 to 97% occupied. Well, that's because we have a good quality of place, right? We've got good management, we've got a good product. So I think we're very fortunate to be in this situation. After Ann Baker was terminated in the legislature, represent the same district, I took an opportunity to run for that office, and I was elected and served at the state level. So I've got a very unique set of skills in the sense that I've served at the municipal level twice, two different communities, 2 different states, served at the county level and at the state level. So I'd like to think I understand how all 3 work. I definitely know how they don't work together, and how they can work better. And that's one of the things that I think one of the strengths that I bring to serving as council president here in Westlake is that experience, and bringing new ideas. And some work and some don't. Nick knows which ones don't because he calls me and tells me, and he tells me which ones work, and we roll forward with it. But you know, I've got my management style, both in business and in this endeavor, is to be very inclusive and very engaging. And I reach out to council members all the time for opinions on different issues, or you know, for them to take a lead on certain areas that I think would be important for the city to move down. And it's a little different than other communities. And I recognize that. But you know what? To me, I'd rather hear from people and hear especially from my colleagues on council who have been here. You know, we have 7 members. We have 3 brand new members of council. I'm the only one who served in elected capacity before, but we've got Nick who's been on 9 years. He's been on 9. Dennis Sullivan's been on 17. Michael O'Donnell's 22. 21, and Mark Getze has been on for 12.
Probably, yeah,
12 years. So we've got some really
13.
13. We've got some really good experience, and the folks that rolled off, you know, Michael Kalina is council president for 26 years, on council for 43, had a wealth of knowledge and experience. And we lost this year. Ken Brady rolled off council. We had this passed away, but he rolled off council, and he was on 26 years. Linda Apple was on 8 years. So we now have some new fresh ideas coming in, and we've got some good seasoned folks who can bring us a good wealth and rounding of knowledge and information. So I didn't have anything to say prepared, but I rattled off a lot of stuff, didn't I?
Yes, you did, and I'm sorry I did not include Sandy
Oh, that's
Springs
okay.
in the bio. I did see that there. But you typed that in nicely, and it is really interesting to think about setting up an inaugural government for a city.
And that was a unique experience because we literally had nothing. You know, Cuyahoga County was a moving ship, and we just changed the top level government. Sandy Springs, we didn't have 1 employee. As a matter of fact, when we had to go to the ballot, we passed the end of June, beginning of July, we took over December 1st. So I was on the organizational committee for the last 2 or 3 years. I was treasurer to get it on the ballot, and then we had a transition committee. Once it passed 93 and 7. Once it passed, in that short window of time, we ramped up the government starting December 1st, and we had an election in November. Then we started in December. Well, myself and one of my other colleagues, she and I were in runoff. So actually, when the city started December 1st, we weren't seated because the primary was the next day, or our runoff was the next day. So we were seated the next week. But I'll tell you what was interesting with that is, had other members been in a primary, been in a runoff, we might not have had a majority to pass the inaugural legislation to start the city because they didn't time it correctly. So if two more members and 4 of the 7 of us were in runoffs, they wouldn't have been able to pass anything. So what happened there, what was interesting, is when the property taxes in Georgia, income comes in 2 primary. There's no income tax, municipal income tax. So it's property taxes, and you get a percentage of the sales tax. Those are your largest chunks of money. Unlike here, 65% of our revenue in Westlake comes from income tax. So it's a shift in how the revenue comes in. But we thought property tax due in October, we get that money starting December 1st. Well, that money's paid in arrears. So the county said, you're not getting a dime of the largest chunk of your money. So we said, okay, well, we'll just start with the income tax. And then the income tax, you're not eligible. The sales tax, you're not eligible for until you're a qualified city, which we couldn't even apply to in 4 months in the city. So we literally had no money. Like, I wrote a check from our organization that was involved in the referendum for like $3,000, and that was like our first deposit. And we partnered with a corporation that basically loaned us the money in order to $100 million in order for us to start our city. And we used to do a tax anticipation note, and that's how we started. So a little different. Cuyahoga County was up and running. It was taking these individual silos of the elected officials and consolidating them basically into one, and going through various culture changes between, you've got a number, the recorder and the treasurer, the auditor and the county commissioners, the sheriff, all elected independently. They run their own organizations, how they want to run them. Very little coordination and consolidation. And so that was the challenge we had in the county government, was bringing all that together under the executive and running it, as a single entity. And that, I don't think there's been enough focus. And I'm not telling you anything I haven't told to current and former county executives. I thought that the opportunity was there to consolidate those. And I told Mr. Fitzgerald that, early on, and I told Armin Budish before he was even elected, and I told all the candidates, but specifically with Armin, I said, you've got a very tough job in coordinating this governmental entity, because what Ed started and didn't finish, you now have to finish. And where Ed started with independent silos, merging them together, you now have to kind of figure out what he did do, didn't do, and then form a strategy how to move forward. I said, I said, if I was executive, I said, my first position would be, in my first 4 years, was to finish the consolidation before I introduced any new programs. And Armin, I was finance chair during his first term, and he came up with a budget that had a lot of stuff in it. We were able to kind of focus it down a little bit, so we spend a little more time on the consolidation, but it's still going on. The ERP project, I voted on that 7 years ago, and it's still not done, and it's significantly over the budget. But that's one of the things that needs to happen. That's an electronic consolidation of data and information with the expectation the organization would work better. So that was one of the great experiences in forming that government as well, but it was different than the city. Different.
So I posed a hypothetical situation to you, as was suggested by one of our members. If a section of Detroit Road needs to be repaved, and that's a road that goes from city to city to city, how is that project brought to attention? Who funds it? What's the timing of it? Who has to initiate the project, and then who is the ultimate decision maker?
So, and that's a great question, because there's a lot of confusion. So there are, I'll boil it down to 4 basic areas of responsibilities for roads. The city has responsibility for its roads. The county has responsibility for its roads. There's an asterisk there, and I'll come back to that. The state maintains its roads, and the federal government has the interstate highways. So it's a coordination. So right now, for example, we've got Columbia Road. That interchange is going on right now. That's a combination of federal and municipal. It's a joint project. We put $2 million in, and they funded the rest of it. So the way those projects get put on the list, on the agenda, is the roads or bridges are graded. Basically, the county engineer, and even though we don't elect a county engineer, there is still a county engineer. Just like here in our city, we have a municipal engineer. They grade the roads A through F, and as they deteriorate over time, which they do, is when they move up the priority list to get repaved. So that's fundamentally how that happens. Detroit Road, Hilliard, Bradley, those are some are state, some are county roads. We work with them and hopefully get some funding from them to help us with that. But often we roll forward with maintaining the roads at a different schedule, because a lot of times we don't want to wait. That's why our roads are so good in the city.
Given the Hilliard example,
Yeah.
Rocky River got the money, but we didn't get any funds, so we had to pay for ours.
Yeah.
It's
So,
kind of a long story.
and then you had one else at the county, Bradley is an example. They wanted to stop the county. These projects take, by the way, years. This isn't like you call up and say, oh, by the way, now it's an emergency issue, but don't call up and say, hey, Mayor Fluff, I noticed that this municipal roads are different, but Hilliard or Detroit Road needs to be done. Those typically take about 4 to 7 years from when they start to deteriorate. When they hit sea level, they get graded as C, is when they start moving up the list. And then hopefully by the time it's a D, you don't want to get to an F, they're out there repairing the road. Westlake has adopted, and this is why I keep talking about some of the issues we have are really minuscule compared to what other communities have. We kind of have an unofficial dig once policy. I don't know if you've heard of that or not, but if there's a road that's being repaired, we'll go in and look at the water lines and sewer lines. Because why not, while you're ripping the road up, in case something is deficient, get the road, then we got to go in and rip it up or fix the infrastructure underneath. So it's not an official city policy, it's just been by practice that will repair the subsurface underneath it, the sub infrastructure underneath it. So it depends where it's coming from. A lot of the municipal roads, it's on our own schedule. Our engineer will analyze which roads need to be done. We do have a very aggressive, I mentioned sidewalks earlier, we do a very aggressive road and sidewalk programming. And so the city's divided into quadrants. And so right now, it's not your ward. Whose ward is on the sidewalk quadrant? I mean,
They've been focusing on 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Pretty much
So,
right now.
yeah, so wards 1 and 2 right now are the city focuses every 4 years on analyzing and having the sidewalks repaired. That's why our sidewalks are in such good shape. Same thing with our roads. We do a quadrant program with our roads, and we do a lot of crack sealing and pothole repair and restriping. I saw the restriping trucks around. It's that time of the year to restripe. A lot of communities don't have the resources or the vision to focus on that. That's why you see a lot when you leave Westlake, you know when you leave another city. You can tell just by the condition of the roads, almost half the municipal line. So it would depend. City, it's us. County, it can be them. It's us. Then the same thing, state, there's some participation federally as well.
So input from residents to the city, even if it's not a city road, would still maybe be noted
Oh, yeah.
for communication with the county or the state.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And we welcome that input. Nick knows his ward real well. And he's probably already the engineer to your call or question coming in and saying, hey, my road's got a pothole in it. Nick's probably already made the call. And knowing him, if he was able to, he'd be out there with the shovel repairing it himself.
I'd like to say the roads are really in good shape. I mean, in excellent shape right now. Really, I think so. If anybody has an issue, please let me know, even if it's not my ward. Well, that used to be my committee, it's not anymore, but believe me, we were on it. So, we were on it. So,
Nick can maybe test this. And Nick tells a story that if somebody in Westlake has an issue with their car or rattle, that don't drive the car. Your mechanic won't drive the car in Westlake because our roads are too good. It won't spark the rattle to the car, so he tells them to drive out. You work for Nick Mayer, so that might be it.
I'm very familiar with that. It's hard to find certain noises on our roads.
Yeah.
So,
But I hope I answered that, or maybe I evaded it. I don't know.
well, it's complicated.
Yeah, it is. But the bottom line is, if you reach out to your ward council member or me or the mayor, we'll address the issue and run the item up. I know that our council members are very responsive. So if you respond, you send us an email, we will get back to you. And oftentimes it's with input from the folks within the city. If it's engineering, if it's planning, if it's code enforcement, we usually coordinate with them to get the appropriate response.
For emergency services, tell me how that coordination works, because I know Westlake emergency has responded to situations in other towns nearby. Tell me how that coordination happens.
So there's a mutual aid automatic aid agreements that the city enters into with our surrounding communities, and it works both ways. So we have 2 ambulances. So if both ambulances are on a run and we get a third call between our joint dispatch that we're currently operating under, they'll call a Bay Village, depending where it is. Right, if it's near the Bay Village, I live on Bradley, right near the Bay, Bay line. If I had a call and our 2 ambulances were not available, they'd send Bay. If you're down in the southern part of the city, they'll send North Olmsted. Depends where you are. So we've got a very good coordination effort with our local communities on a mutual aid arrangement for both police, fire, and EMS. When unfortunately some of our neighbors, and we're not immune to it, but I'm going to pick on them for a minute. We've had a couple bank robberies in the city to our south, and Starbucks got robbed as an example. And in Rocky River, about a month ago, there was a carjacking, and our department responded to all of that. And when we have an issue here in Westlake, and if we need response, they'll come right in to us as well. The other thing that we have here, which is really goes unnoticed, although I know the league knows about it because we send a monitor to all the council of government meetings once a month, is our council of governments, our 5 cities and Lakewood have been together for almost 50 years, coordinating efforts wherever we can. So one of the great things that has come out of that, and a number of things, but is our West Shore Enforcement Bureau and our SWAT unit, various public safety functions there. So that's another great example of us working together. So a number of our policemen are on the SWAT team, as our surrounding communities. That there's a SWAT call, they all respond. So we've been able to work together, I would argue, probably as the model for Cuyahoga County when it comes to collaboration, and for a long time, it's got to be close to 50 years, I would think, at this point. So those are automatic mutual aid agreements that have been in place, and they work very well.
I'm not originally from Ohio, so I've experienced different government structures in other states where I've lived. And one of those states had schools by county as opposed to by city. What is the benefit or the trade-off, pros and cons for having county versus city schools?
Well, when I lived in Atlanta, we had county system, except for the city of Atlanta. Excuse me, in Fulton County, in Cobb County, everybody but the city of Marietta. So I've experienced, kind of the same thing you've experienced. So when we formed, our state is well, and George is older than us as far as corporation as a city or part of the union. It goes back to what we probably function as to when these communities were formed, back in the day. And there's a great belief, and there are certain things I believe that we can, from a community perspective, collaborate on and do and expand beyond our municipal borders. I think the way our education system is structured here and having our municipal school district, I like it. I think it's part of the hometown experience of the Midwest as opposed to the South, where I came from. In Atlanta, when I moved there in 1990, there were 2 million people. When I left in 2007, 17 years later, there were 6.5 million. And that's not because a lot of babies were being born, it's because people were moving in from all over. And you didn't have that sense of community you have here. And I believe having a local school district like we have here in Westlake, we've got great school districts on the West Shore, really lends to the quality of life that we experience here in Westlake.
I think I've had good experience with the Westlake City Schools also. Does anyone else have a question?
I just want to say something. He's being way too modest on, he's been so important in all the capacities of where he served, like when he went to the state and when he went to county to get, and I'm not trying to get politics involved, but he's a Republican in an all Democratic area in the county to get, on the committee, finance, running that, and being at the state level. He was in the critical areas and very important to a lot of the things that have, changed the way we do business. I'm not going to be specific, but
No, I mean, if you boil things down at the end of the day, people are people, and the needs are the needs that need to be met. And when I served on county council, I was fortunate, as Nick said, I chaired the finance committee down there, and recognizing that body, or like the partisan environment, we didn't really operate that way. And I'm not sure in my role now, I engage a little bit. I don't see it operating in a partisan environment, but to serve as finance chair, it was an honor to do that. And we were able to do some very good things that really benefited the community. And one of the programs that I put in place, there were a couple that I'll promote, but one that comes up that relates to cities in particular is, this came out of going to economy. Over the 6 years, I only missed 2. Now I would show up in the beginning and managers are like, oh, you're here again. I'm like, well, let me just sit and I'll report out what we're doing, because it's important and I need to understand more of what you need from us. But there's a federal program, a community development block grant program, and you're really only eligible if you meet some criteria. Primarily, it's for economically underserved communities, which we have very few pockets in the West Shore that are eligible. There are some. Bay has one, Rocky River. So Linda Street, where the east side of Linda Street was in the CDBG corridor, so they were able to get money. Now they're not. They've economically, qualified not to be in there. This is where this program I'll explain to you came from. Across, so Linda Street down the middle, east was a CDBG eligible, economically underserved area. The west side was not, of the same street, right? That was the defining line. And they were going through a project where they received some federal money, and they wanted some more money to have the same park benches and garbage cans on the west side of the street as the east side, but they just didn't have the money to do it. And they came to the county, and I said, well, we really don't, have money. But all of a sudden, the casino revenue started becoming available. So we created the CDSG program, Community Development Supplemental Grant Program. And it was originally started as $1 million program for grants up to $50,000, so up to 20, could be at least 20 grants. If somebody needed less, we give, it was really $1 million we're trying to give out. And it could basically go for anything. And so that program, I just had somebody 2 days ago, was at an event, somebody out of Parma Heights, who came up and thanked me for starting that program because they're still using it 10 years later. I mean, it's been a very successful program. And it goes, like I said, for anything. So now a lot of it goes towards parks, green space, things like that, but it could go towards any qualified municipal need. It's interesting, when I was at the state,
Tell them what we got money for.
at the state,
No, for the county. What we got money for, well, just recently.
oh, so part of the, we threw out $1 million.
Yeah.
So part of the ARPA, if you remember, it's been in the paper, the county council reserved $66 million or $6 million per council member to recommend, I'll say it that way, to recommend projects from their district. And so in 2 weeks ago, just about 2 weeks ago, the final vote was taken and Ann Baker was able to secure $1 million for the city of Westlake for Parkside Intermediate School, which we're in the process now of doing some demolition and hopefully converting that into park active / passive green space, park space. So that's a good example of county and city working together. At the state level, there's an opportunity for capital budget requests. And when I was there, we're very fortunate in my first term, all but one of my, and this one I knew wasn't going to qualify, all of my district projects received funding. And so in that General Assembly, one of the first projects from Westlake was the Lily Weston House. And so right now, right outside, right outside. I'm trying to figure out where we are. It's just over here. So the Lily Weston House is one of only 2 historical buildings in the city of Westlake. And it was very dilapidated. It just was not maintained very well. It was donated to us. So we were able to get, at that time, what we thought was half of the cost, $200,000. Cost since has risen to $600,000, but we were able to get another $100,000 this past budget to help us offset those costs. But so there's an example of state helping local communities with some funding opportunities to help better the quality of their life.
How about the handicap playground?
Yeah, so I think I should have written that. So in my second, and so that capital budget I got about $1 million, which was, I believe, the most the West Shore has seen in a long time, maybe ever. Bay Village got a lot of money, or Olmsted got money for a fiber ring. Favorite Park got some money for their community center. Huntington Playhouse got money, and so anyhow, the next General Assembly, we were able to get about $450,000 for the new handicap accessible playground at Clay Park. It's right behind the new aquatic center. So
Beautiful.
if you come up through Clay Cabot, between Clay Cabot and the new aquatic center. So we were able to get $450,000 for that. That year, I was able to get about $2 million in capital budget money. So I was able to secure $3 million over 2 capital budgets, which like I said, for a suburb like this, a community like this, that's a lot. Usually you only see the urban cores get that amount of money. And so we were very fortunate. So that's one example. Another example of how state, can help skipping over county municipalities directly.
One other questions? Do we have questions?
Mentioned that ARP.
Yeah.
I think it was 10 days ago, the Plain Dealer, I don't know if you saw that article about, but I'm curious, I'm really interested to know your perspective, because I don't know what to think. But the Plain Dealer reported the 66 million divided amongst the 11 council members, and they described it as a slush fund, that they editorialized that it was illegal and violated sunshine laws the way they did it. And I'm really curious to hear, I don't know if you read that.
I did.
Or what do you think? What should we?
So originally, when I heard that fund was being created, I'm not going to go with the terms illegal, or I look at it, did it violate the charter or not? And I went and looked at the charter because as Janice knows, I'm kind of geeky that way. And as Nick's learning with our city charter, I'm kind of, they're rules. They're not suggestions of good behavior. They're actually rules. And so the way the charter was written, I had the charter of 10. And so the way the charter is written is that no individual council member has the authority to personally or individually appropriate funds. Okay, now I'll tell you where it came from. City of Cleveland, their council members do have that authority. City of Cleveland council members get $500,000 a year of that CDBG money I was talking about. And they have the individual discretion to spend that money in their wards as they see fit with no other oversight or responsibility. The way the council did it is that they appropriated an amount per ward, up to an amount per ward, $6 million for projects from that ward, but the entire body votes on it. So there is the opportunity, I'm not saying it does or doesn't happen, but there is the opportunity for a council member to submit a project and the body vote it down. That's the difference. Now, I work for Metro Health and we have a couple projects that we've applied in to get some ARPA funding. And I know in District 7, which is from Glenville to the main, to West 25th, we're trying to get some money there. And that council member has received almost $40 million worth of requests for $6 million worth of projects. And I can only imagine the others have the same thing. And so we're pretty close to it, depending how you're running it. Nan out here did it differently. She basically talked to the mayors and said, what do you need? Others put it out for community offering and one-man application process, but offered it more broadly. That's why there's almost 40 million in District 7. So I don't believe that it violates the charter the way they're doing it, because they're not individually appropriating. It wasn't like, here's 6 million, man, you write your check or you tell us who you want the check written out to. It's not done that way. There's a process, an application process. There's a review process. It's very similar to the CDSG program that I created 12 years ago. We set an amount of $1 million for up to 20 projects. They submit applications in. They're vetted and voted on by the entire body. That's I believe the issue there. Now, did they have discussions? I can't opine. Did they have discussions in secret or private? I have no idea. I know that when I was there, we would have discussions with one-on-one with policy staff on projects, but I don't know of you would need 6 or 6 of them got together in a room and had a private discussion.
Both to Bruce and to David, I'm very concerned about the same 66 million. Because one piece of me says, if you don't trust the people you voted on to put in those positions of authority, what are we doing with elective offices? That I would think that somebody whose job was to look out about the area that they represent all the time should have a pretty good idea of what those needs are, and could be forceful in saying maybe it isn't even to do it, just divide it by 11. Here's another way to do it. But then I look at voter turnout, and I always wish I knew if the people that have complained about this have voted.
All right, since the group here has voting in their title, I'll tell you a funny story. I'm gonna bust my son out. So.
You want them to blink that out.
No, that's all right. I think he knows I tell him the story all the time. So he was in college and I was on the ballot and I contested primary, and he gets his request for an absentee ballot. He gets his ballot sent to him, and the election comes around, and there's a way, this go to the Board of Elections, their website, you can see if somebody's voted. You can't see how they vote, right? So about a month after the votes are tabulated, and I go and I'm checking this, and he didn't vote. So he called me and wants to talk about politics. And I said, no, buddy, I'll talk to you after November when I know you voted, but if you don't vote, you can't talk to me about politics. That's kind of our rule in the house.
Now he's a decorated veteran.
Yeah. now he just got promoted to captain. He's a captain in the Air Force, flying drones. But yeah, so that's kind of a rule in my house. Here, to your point, Janice, right? If you want to participate, I'll take calls. I love when people call me and they say, I voted for you, and I look at it. It doesn't matter if you vote or not, your constituent can help you, even if you're not in my district or ward or wherever I am. I'm still going to help you. And actually, I get offended when people say that. It's almost like there's an expectation that because they voted, say they voted for them, that I'm gonna act differently towards them. I never have treated anyone. I don't care what party, whether you voted for me or not. You get the same amount of respect and the same amount of attention to the issue.
Can I just follow up, just quickly? So the plain dealer is influential. They kind of came out with that story, and in the story said it was slush funds and these sort of things. Why? Or,
Well, so with that, and I'm not gonna get
yeah,
that,
I'm
you know,
just curious.
but so with that issue in particular, so Lee Weingart was Martin County executive, made this an issue. And he had the county prosecutor look into it. The county prosecutor issued an opinion that there's no violation. So there's, council has not law directors, has 2 lawyers on staff. And the county has an inspector general. We're the only county in the state that has one. And I don't know if she's looked into it or not, but I'd imagine if the prosecutor looked into it, that Inspector General Beeler would have looked into it. But the fact that the county prosecutor looked into it and said there's nothing wrong here should at least give some comfort to the legality of the issue. So I wouldn't be concerned from that perspective.
Do you think it's a politically sort of movement?
I'm not going to opine on other political bodies'
Thank you.
decision making.
Thank you.
So, changing the topic just a little bit. When I have not spent much time on the county website, but I did recently. How do the social services, the health and human services coordinate between the state and the county and our city?
So, okay, so the funding for health and human services comes from 2 primary sources: federal money that flows through, either through the state to the county or from the state directly, or from the federal government to the county. We in Cuyahoga County also have the health and human services levy, and which is about $250 million a year that comes in that helps provide the funding for the social services programs that we provide in the county. Now, keep in mind, county government by structure are extensions of the state. So they are basically the state's authority in the county, which is a lot of folks don't necessarily recognize that. So there's a lot of jurisdiction, so a lot of cross jurisdiction, a lot of cross communication there. So the county has to follow the state Medicaid as an example. So Medicaid at the state level is the largest single component of the state budget. 3 large buckets in the state budget, about 90% of the state budget is Medicaid, education, and incarceration. So just to kind of put it in perspective. The other 10%, not that $7 billion isn't a lot of money to argue over, but that's where all the turf wars really take place. So there's a lot of coordination because there are a lot of federal and state rules that the local governments the county governments have to follow in order to help get those funds distributed out to the appropriate agencies. And often it's done through some competitive bids. When we appropriate out the health and human service levies, when I was finance chair, Metro Health gets now they get $32 million a year of the $250 million. The Adams Board is really the largest recipient. They deal with that often addiction issues, and they have their own grant process, application process, and then there are other agencies that get health and human services, social service dollars through the county.
Any other questions, Janice?
Is our Westlake Community Services, is that a function that's totally a city function and not all cities have it in Ohio, or is that a state or
So
county?
community services.
The senior center activities, the rec center, all those kind of things, separate from the library, but.
That's all under the city's umbrella. So, and you're right, not every city. Now townships don't have any of that by and large. I mean, there are some townships in the Cincinnati area. There's 60,000 people. I mean, they're massive, but they generally don't have senior or community-related recreation services.
Not allowed to say senior.
No, what is it? What do I call it? No, I'm just talking about senior services in general. But so we passed in 2017 a levy to deal with, to help us with recreation related activities. And part of that went to build the new community center. That's there. My mother-in-law's there every day. She loves it. She actually used to go to Florida for the winter, and she's like, well, I don't want to leave my friends here. So she's going to stay here this winter instead of go to Florida. So we provide those services, and that's a municipal function. It's one of the value adds. It's one of the things that, you know, I think makes us really a strong community. And it's proximity now to the rec center, being able to share resources and share facilities and activities. You know, it's just, to me, it's a phenomenal asset in the city. Yes.
I don't really understand the relationship between the council and the mayor. I live in Olmsted Falls, and I don't know if it's the same as in Westlake, but it seems like council people can stay on for a long time. Mayors seem to be term limited.
So
No?
not Westlake, actually, Mayor Clough's been in 37 years.
Oh, wow.
Are you from the township or the falls?
The falls.
You've got, I like your mayor, and Brian Chittister is actually one of my real good friends. He's one of your councilmen at large there. So I don't know how they're structured. Our city, we have no term limits,
Okay.
which I will tell you, that's a whole different meeting about the value of not having term limits.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of term limits, but that's a whole different discussion. But well, whenever you want to have that, I'll let it come on. So with that,
We'll
Westlake,
schedule that next time.
yeah, we don't have term limits in Westlake. So the role fundamentally is, the way the charter is written, is the mayor's the CEO and council effectively is the board of directors. So if you look at it in any government that's structured this way, whether it's the legislature, you know, whether, you know, the governor and the legislature, county executive and council, the mayor and council, theoretically, with some exception, the mayor, a governor, a county executive executes the strategy and plan that council puts forward. And there are some that we've in Westlake, our mayor, our law directors elected as well. They have the discretion to spend up to a certain amount of money independently, which is granted to them by council. But the legislative body is the one that sets the rules, the vision, strategy, and the mayor. Now, the mayor comes and says, hey, I want to do these things, and the council opines to it and then sets the guidance and guidelines, and the mayor executes that. So I'm not saying that council has all the ideas. We don't. But the mayor has ideas, comes back, gets approval by council, and then the mayor executes those ideas and the concepts from council as well. It's a fair assessment.
I think that was a wonderful assessment. And Olmsted Falls is semi-similar to that. The township has trustees and it's totally different. And I would like to say, I think our system, it really works. So I think it's a great example of how the city, you know, should work. We've been very blessed to have so many key people, you know, in all different areas. This isn't my meeting. I'm sorry.
No, one of the things you asked me was to talk about the ballot issues. So there are two ballot issues in Westlake. So I come bearing gifts. So I will, this is one of the rezoning issues that's coming before the voters. Yeah, this is, so we'll talk about rezoning in, well, here,
Is this 83 or 89?
So in Westlake, we have referendum zone. If you're going to increase the density on a parcel, it has to go before the voters. And actually, it's a very lengthy process. I think we voted on this item like in February, knowing it wouldn't be on the ballot until November. And in order for us to vote on it, it had to be before committee and planning commission. This is probably a 2-year process to get to the ballot in Westlake. And so here's what's going on with that parcel. We have two issues. We have liquor permit, and we've got this. With this parcel, this is right next to the Lutheran Church on Detroit Road. The gentleman who, well, I just found this out, so I'll rephrase that. The parcel directly west of the church is owned by a gentleman who wants to develop some townhomes on the property. He was on the ballot last year. He did not own at the time the land further east of that. Okay, that's what this referendum is. He would like to acquire the parcel just east of it, which is what you see on that drawing. actually what's in yellow. So what's in orange has already been rezoned in 2021. The yellow above it are the two parcels that those current homeowners. Those two homeowners want to rezone it to be the same zoning as the parcel next to it, with what we believe would be a consolidation of the parcels and aggregation, so that the development will be larger than what's currently planned. So that's the purpose for that.
Thank you.
Are there any questions about that?
Well, I was on planning, so I was involved in all that from the beginning. And he summed it perfectly. The orange part that's down below in the picture has already been approved by the voters. Okay, so also that, if you see the yellow part on the top picture, that's what's up on the election now. And it would be just putting that whole square together, so it's logical.
Right, that
So-
is what I thought it was, but it's nice to have it confirmed. We were very aware of
Sure.
the issue that passed last November. There was a lot of discussion.
So without getting political, the planning, which is in all the grassroots stuff is done in planning, and we're all a part. And Dave is the first council president, and I've lived here my whole life. And, including Bill Corley till there, I knew all the old, where they all were, but he's the first one. He goes to every meeting, he's involved. When he says he communicates at least twice a week to every council member, he is very, very involved. I don't know how he does this other job, but anyhow. What I was gonna say is this kind of is already been approved by planning, went through all the planning, was already approved by council, approved by the mayor. I mean, it's pretty much a no-brainer. The people already voted on it once. It's just kind of sealing it all together. That's all. Is that a good way to sum it up?
I did have a question. This is more of a general question. So I'm kind of curious if you could explain why for a zoning issue, the entire city votes on it, whereas for the liquor issue, for example, or other issues, only certain wards or precincts vote on it. Is there a reason for that?
I do not know the answer to that.
I do.
Nick does.
Okay.
If so,
No, it's okay. So if, for example, if something, there's different levels how each thing is coded. So if something is residential or business or however, in this case, they have to rezone this parcel. And when you have to rezone, it has to go before the whole city.
Okay.
Unlike there is also.
her question is why does a rezoning go before the whole city instead of just within that ward?
Because the whole city would be impacted and involved, because that's how they feel with any type of zoning things, that always involves the whole city. Now, and for example, an alcohol license on something, that does not go before the whole city. That could be just a ward thing, just giving you.
Is there a reason for that? Because I guess to me, that also impacts everyone in the city, not just the people who live in that precinct.
Well, that's why.
No, I mean the liquor license. I mean the liquor
Oh, a
issue.
liquor license?
Yeah. I guess I'm just wondering why the distinction. Why is
I
one?
could find that.
I think it's also historic and that the state has some rules about how many liquor joints.
Licenses,
there can
right.
be.
Yes, I know there are like limits on the
They're
number
called
of
liquor
liquor
joints.
That's where I grew up, that's what they call them.
I'm not even a drinker.
So the liquor permit that's on the ballot, if you live in that ward, is, so I think Julie has done a great job with Hail Mary, which is across right down the street here. That building, as you know, is a number of restaurants over a number of years, and she's got a business that's really thriving and doing well. She's expanded, and now liquor permit's going to be for Salty Mary, which is the old Friendlies down on Columbia.
It's beautiful. They did a real good job.
And so it's for Sunday liquor sales. She has a liquor permit now, so don't think if you go there and she's serving liquor, she doesn't have a permit, she does. This is for Sunday liquor permit. So that's what's on the ballot, the other issue on the ballot.
And that's what the other one was. If it's just, most of them have licenses, and this is just
It's
an
just like an
add-on.
add-on to
And
that.
some of those we don't really even, it's complicated. Some can be internally approved, depending on what it is, but not liquor licenses.
So it's interesting when you talk about an area being rezoned like this, that the city gets to vote on it. So Crocker Park was voted down by the residents of that ward. But it was voted positively by the rest of the city. We had a similar issue down over in Prestwick on Center Ridge, just west of Detroit. And it turned out to be they were zoned for 24 townhomes they built. They're gonna build 18, whatever it is. And once again, that failed the local board, but passed the city. So I don't know the answer to that. I mean, it could be that,
No, it's a great example. Could you imagine if we didn't have Crocker Park?
Yeah.
so it's an interesting discussion, but that right now in Westlake, referendum zone is city line.
I want to add, because you've got this good picture here, I think there's some factors about Westlake that are a little different than historically because of what we've experienced in Olmsted Falls. I look at that long skinny lot. If you look at an old Westlake map, like 1820, 1830, there's many long skinny lots. The closer to the lake, the more long skinny lots there are. And then, think back when Center Ridge would have been a dirt road. Then the lots started going wide and narrow, so they go a different way. Well, we still are dependent on what those original property pieces were and when they came up for sale and what our governments thought about them at the time.
And I live on Bradley Road. We have a lot of non-conforming lots now, meaning they don't conform. So we have to have 100-foot minimum lot width. Bradley Road, there are 50-foot lot widths. And those lots come for sale, and it's hard to sell because they've got to aggregate them. They've got to put at least two together in order to build on. And so, and to give you, there's one lot, it's not quite 100 feet, but to Janice's point, it's so deep, it's an acre, and it's like 75 feet wide, but it's an acre in total footage because it's so deep.
And honestly, Westlake did an amazing thing to pass its original zoning plan.
Well,
There's almost no city that did one that long ago that's cared for it as well.
Well, and I appreciate you bringing that up because we are right now thinking on opposite sides of this, which is fine because I have the other 6 votes, but one of the city and the plan that Janice was talking about is a development plan for the city. When the city was open fields and vineyards, it was to encourage development. The city's done a great job not only putting that forward but managing that. Now, my belief is we're in a redevelopment phase. We don't have a lot of open space left. We have some, and we're trying to preserve it, which is some of the discussions we're having with the school district about their vacant property, and we were able to get one back and return it to park space instead of developing it. Is we have a moratorium right now on townhomes, duplexes, clusters, and apartments, just for us to take a hard look at what do we want to, now that we're redeveloping, what do we want that to look like? Do we want the same level of density that is currently on the plan? Or do we want to manage density a little different? Do we want to encourage cluster homes, which requires a different look? So we just contracted with an organization at Cincinnati September 1st for them to do a complete evaluation of concepts we presented them. Now this process, we're going to have to extend the moratorium. We entered this in April, and we've had a lot of activity between then and now, including this meeting I talked about with the real estate folks about telling us what you see is emerging in our community and how can we preserve where we are. And this kind of, we live in Westlake. We truly enjoy the quality of life that we have here. And I came from Atlanta. I mentioned 2 million, from New Jersey. 2 million to 6.5 million in 17 years. And when I moved here, I used to work in Solon, and people would say, "Oh my gosh, you got from Westlake to Solon." And I said, "Well, in Atlanta, that's one way for half a gallon of milk because the congestion is so bad." And I want to make sure that we don't experience some of that same growth. Avon put an item on the ballot to raise their income tax, to purchase land, to slow down development, to convert it to park space. So we're in a unique situation right now where I think we can continue to grow the city in a very managed way so that we don't experience excessive traffic. You know, we've got probably one of our more congested areas is Crocker. And there's development going on both sides of Crocker Road. And we're trying to manage that growth. And I think we're doing a very good job at that. But if we don't get a handle on some of this development that is possibly coming, we could wind up being much more dense, which would change our quality of life. And the other thing I want to mention, and this is a consideration, and we need to think about this, but you know, you always hear builders say, well, we're going to put $1 million house and your city's going to get all this property tax. We get 15% of whatever you pay in your property taxes as the city. The schools get 50, the HHS levy, the Port Authority, the Metro Parks, all these other groups get 50. We only get 15%. So the average home price in Westlake is around $500,000. So we get $750 a year to the city. The other major component I mentioned of our income tax, of our revenue, is income tax. 75% of the residents who live in Westlake work outside of Westlake. We have 100% municipal income tax credit. So we get 0 municipal income tax credit from 75% of the people who live here. So now maybe when people work from home, the shifting is going to change that. We're going to see, but we have a very good mix of industrial, commercial, and residential land use in the city. And we have some very good employers that employ a lot of people at high-paying jobs, whether it's Highland or American Greetings or Travel Centers are 3 largest employers. Although Equity Trust is starting to, they're doing a good job in growing their business over there. But if we want to maintain the quality of life that we have to make sure that we balance our land use to be able to provide the resources we need to maintain this quadrant program of roads and sidewalks and the community center and those services, and the recreation center and those youth and adult and like seniors. I think, what am I calling? Did I say seniors?
By the way, I grandfathered the moratorium on the senior centers or whatever you want to call them, nursing homes, whatever you want to call them. So
We're just looking very diligently on how to
I think 19 is enough.
how to manage growth. And Vitalia is a classic example. They came in and they wanted to put they want to put apartments, independent living apartments on their property to be able to parlay off of the services they provide in their facility. But they wanted a much more robust, a larger building. And we were able to negotiate with them and say, yes, we like the product you're putting here. However, it's a little too big for what we would like in our community. And we came up to a compromise that they haven't broken ground yet, but they're going to break ground on that project. And so that's an example of us being able to encourage the right kind of development. Dwayne Van Dyke is very, very enthusiastic about cluster homes, but our current code doesn't really encourage cluster homes. So we've got it actually requires more density, believe it or not. I'm talking about reducing density, more density requirements for cluster homes than what currently is in our books in order to encourage development. So we may be looking there as an example of maybe increasing density for clusters, but may look at it as a reduction or managing growth in other areas. So we're very conscious of where we are as far as our population, our mix, our land use mix, which converts into our revenue, which converts back directly to how we provide the services to our community. Because if we get too much, if we get out of balance, we're about 55 to 60% residential. We're about 20% commercial, about 7% industrial, and the rest is government, parks, schools, and things like that. We've got to keep that ratio relatively consistent because it works for us.
Great. Well, it seems like the time to say thank you.
Time for me to go pick my wife up at the airport. It worked out great.
Good. Well, thank you so much for your time. Council members here, thank you.
Sure. Be glad to come back and talk about term limits if you'd like.